The alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m. just like every other morning. 12-year-old Damon rolled over on the thin mattress he shared with his little sister in the corner of their grandmother's living room. The springs creaked under his weight as he tried not to wake Keisha, who was still sleeping peacefully beside him. Their grandmother, Nana Betty, was already up in the kitchen. Damon could hear the familiar sounds of her morning routine, the coffee pot bubbling, the old refrigerator humming, and her soft humming of gospel songs that always made him feel safe. Even though their apartment was small and the walls were thin, Nana Betty's voice somehow made everything feel like home. Damon quietly slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the kitchen. Nana Betty was standing at the stove stirring a pot of oatmeal with one hand while holding her back with the other. At 72, she still insisted on taking care of everyone, even though Damon could see how much her arthritis bothered her, especially on cold mornings like this one morning. "Baby," she whispered, not wanting to wake Keisha. "You're up early again." "Couldn't sleep much," Damon admitted, rubbing his eyes. The truth was, he had been thinking about money again. It seemed like that's all he thought about lately. How much they needed, how little they had, and how hard his mom worked just to keep them going. Nana Betty looked at him with those wise eyes that seemed to see right through him. "What's on your mind, honey?" Damon shrugged, not wanting to worry her more than she already was. "Just school stuff, but it wasn't really school stuff." Well, not exactly. It was everything that came with school, like how his sneakers had holes in them that he tried to hide by walking carefully, or how his backpack was held together with duct tape that Nana Betty had wrapped around it so many times it looked like silver armor, or how he had to pack the same peanut butter sandwich every single day because that's all they could afford. His mom, Lisa, worked 2 jobs just to pay for their tiny apartment in the projects. During the day, she cleaned office buildings downtown, and at night she worked at a gas station on the other side of town. Damon hardly saw her except on Sundays when she was too tired to do anything but sleep on the couch. "Your mama left some money for lunch today," Nana Betty said, pointing to 3 crumpled dollar bills on the counter. "She said you've been asking about getting something from that deli you like." Damon's eyes lit up. For weeks he had been walking past Tony's Deli on his way to school, watching other kids go in with their lunch money and come out with sandwiches wrapped in white paper and bags of chips. He had been saving every penny he could find. Coins from under couch cushions, bottles he collected from the park, and even the quarter his teacher gave him for helping clean the classroom after school. Added to his mom's $3, he finally had enough for a real lunch. Not just a peanut butter sandwich, but an actual deli sandwich with meat and cheese and maybe even a pickle on the side. His stomach growled just thinking about it. "She didn't have to do that," Damon said, carefully folding the bills and putting them in his pocket. "That woman works harder than anyone I know," Nana Betty said, ladling oatmeal into a bowl. "She wants you to have nice things sometimes, even when we can't afford them." Damon ate his breakfast quietly, thinking about his mom. He remembered when his dad used to live with them, back when things weren't so hard. His dad, Jerome, used to bring home pizza on Fridays and take Damon to the park on weekends. But that was before Jerome started staying out late and coming home angry. Before the arguing that kept everyone awake at night. Before he finally left one day when Damon was 8, promising to come back but never doing it. After breakfast, Damon got ready for school. He put on his cleanest shirt and the jeans that Nana Betty had patched up so many times they looked like a quilt. He carefully placed his lunch money in the front pocket of his backpack, zipping it up tight so it wouldn't fall out. The walk to school was 3 miles through neighborhoods that got nicer the further he went. Damon had memorized every crack in the sidewalk, every boarded-up building, and every corner where he needed to be extra careful. He walked fast, keeping his head down and his hands in his pockets. About halfway to school, he passed the community center where his older brother Carlos used to play basketball before he joined the army. Carlos had been Damon's hero, tall, strong, and good at everything. When Carlos left for basic training last year, he had pulled Damon aside and made him promise to take care of Nana Betty and help their mom however he could. "You're the man of the house now," Carlos had said, and even though Damon was only 11 at the time, he had taken that responsibility seriously. As Damon walked, he thought about Carlos's letters from overseas. His brother always wrote about the places he was seeing and the friends he was making, but he never forgot to ask about home. In his last letter, Carlos had sent $20 and told Damon to buy something special for himself. But Damon had given the money to his mom instead, watching her face light up when she realized she could buy groceries for a whole week. The school building came into view, and Damon could see other kids getting dropped off by their parents in cars. He wondered what it would be like to have someone drive him to school, to not have to wake up so early just to walk 3 miles. But then he thought about Nana Betty's morning songs and decided that maybe walking wasn't so bad after all. In his first period class, Damon's stomach started rumbling again. He tried to focus on what the teacher was saying about fractions, but all he could think about was lunch. He touched his pocket to make sure the money was still there. It was. During lunch break, most of the other kids went to the cafeteria, but Damon had permission to leave campus. The school knew about his situation. They knew he qualified for free lunch, but they also knew he was proud and didn't always want to take it. Sometimes when he did eat in the cafeteria, other kids would make comments about the free lunch kids, and Damon hated the way it made him feel. Today was going to be different. Today he was going to walk into Tony's deli with his own money and order his own lunch, just like any other kid. He had been planning what he would order for weeks. A turkey sandwich with cheese, lettuce, and tomato, a bag of chips, maybe even a cookie if he had enough money left over. As Damon left the school building, he felt lighter than he had in months. The sun was shining, and for once he didn't feel different from everyone else. He had money in his pocket and a plan for the best lunch he'd had in ages. He didn't know that in just a few minutes everything was about to change. The bell above Tony's deli door chimed as Damon pushed it open. The smell hit him immediately. Fresh bread, sliced meat, and something delicious cooking in the back. His mouth watered as he looked around at the small restaurant he had been dreaming about for weeks. Tony's wasn't fancy, but it was clean and warm. Red checkered tablecloths covered small tables, and the walls were decorated with pictures of Italy and what looked like Tony's family. Behind the counter, Tony himself was slicing meat with practiced ease, his white apron stained from a busy morning. Damon was so excited about finally being here that he almost didn't notice the elderly couple sitting in the corner booth. But something about them caught his attention. Maybe it was how quietly they were talking, or the way the woman kept dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The man looked to be in his 70s, with white hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a simple button-down shirt that had seen better days, and his hands shook slightly as he reached across the table to comfort his wife. The woman was smaller, probably in her late 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her clothes were clean but old, and she kept twisting a wedding ring that looked like it had been worn for decades. Damon couldn't help but overhear pieces of their conversation as he pretended to study the menu board above the counter. The check should have come by now. Helen, the man was saying softly. I called them yesterday and they said it was delayed because of some computer problem. The woman, Helen, nodded but didn't look convinced. I know, Robert. It's just, we've been stretching everything so far already, and with your medication running out tomorrow. Robert reached over and took her hand. We'll figure it out. We always do. But Damon could see the worry in both their faces. He recognized that look because he had seen it on his mom's face so many times. It was the look of people trying to be strong when everything felt like it was falling apart. Damon turned back to the menu, trying not to eavesdrop, but he couldn't help feeling sorry for the couple. They reminded him of Nana Betty, and how she sometimes had to choose between buying her medicine and buying groceries. It wasn't fair that people who had worked their whole lives still had to worry about having enough money for basic things. What can I get for you, son? Tony called out from behind the counter. His voice was friendly with just a hint of an Italian accent. Before Damon could answer, Robert and Helen got up from their table and walked slowly to the counter. Helen leaned heavily on Robert's arm and Damon noticed she was limping slightly. Excuse me, Robert said politely to Damon. We'd like to order something small. Of course, Damon said, stepping aside. He watched as the couple approached Tony's counter. Robert cleared his throat. We'd like to get some lunch, but we need to know prices first. Tony smiled warmly. Sure thing. What are you thinking about? Helen spoke up in a quiet voice. Maybe just a cup of soup? Something we could share? Tony's expression softened. He had been running this deli for 20 years, and he could spot people who were struggling. The soup today is chicken noodle. It's $3.50 for a cup, $4.50 for a bowl. Robert and Helen exchanged glances. Robert pulled out a small change purse and began counting coins slowly. Damon watched as they counted every penny, whispering numbers to each other. "We have $3.67, Helen said finally. "Could we get a cup of soup and maybe—" "Do you have any day-old bread?" Tony nodded. "I can do that. 1 cup of soup and some bread rolls. That'll be $3.50. Damon saw Helen's face brighten a little. At least they could eat something. But then Robert's hands started shaking more as he tried to count out the exact change. Some coins scattered on the floor, and he bent down slowly to pick them up, his face red with embarrassment. "Take your time," Tony said gently. "No rush." As Robert struggled with the coins, Damon overheard more of their conversation. "This is our first real meal in 2 days," Helen whispered to her husband. "I'm so tired of crackers and water." "I know, sweetheart. Once the Social Security check comes, we'll be okay. Just a few more days." Damon felt his heart sink. 2 days without a real meal? He looked down at the money in his own hand. $5 that represented weeks of saving and his mom's sacrifice from working those double shifts. His turkey sandwich suddenly didn't seem as important. He thought about Nana Betty's words from that morning. "That woman works harder than anyone I know. She wants you to have nice things sometimes, even when we can't afford them." But then he thought about something else Nana Betty always said. When you have a choice between helping someone and helping yourself, always choose kindness. The Lord sees everything, and He'll make sure you're taken care of. Robert finally managed to count out $3.50, but his hands were shaking so badly that he dropped another quarter. This time, when he bent to pick it up, he lost his balance slightly and had to grab the counter to steady himself. "Are you okay, sir?" Tony asked with concern. "Just a little dizzy," Robert admitted. "We haven't eaten much lately." That's when Damon made his decision. He stepped forward and gently touched Robert's arm. "Excuse me, sir. Could I help you with something?" Robert looked surprised. "Oh, that's very kind, young man, but we're fine." But Damon could see they weren't fine. Helen was swaying on her feet and Robert's face was pale. These people needed help and he was in a position to give it. "Tony," Damon said, his voice stronger now, "I'd like to pay for their lunch." The deli went quiet. Robert and Helen stared at him in shock. "Son, that's very nice of you, but we couldn't possibly," Robert started. "Please," Damon said. "My grandmother always tells me that food tastes better when it's shared. And you look like you could use a good meal." Helen's eyes filled with tears. "But you're just a child. You shouldn't have to." "I want to," Damon said simply. He turned to Tony. "Could you give them a bowl of soup instead of a cup? And maybe some sandwiches too? Something that will fill them up properly." Tony looked at the money in Damon's hand, then at the elderly couple. "That'll be about $8 for a good meal for both of them." Damon only had $5. His heart sank for a moment, but then Tony smiled. "But today I'm having a special. $5 gets them a bowl of soup each, 2 sandwiches, and some cookies for dessert. How does that sound?" Damon grinned and handed over his money. "That sounds perfect." Robert tried one more time to protest. "Young man, this is your lunch money. You need to eat too." Damon shrugged. "I'll be okay. I had a big breakfast." It wasn't exactly true, but seeing the relief on their faces made his empty stomach feel less important. Helen was crying now, but they were happy tears. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Damon said. "Just enjoy your lunch." As Tony started preparing their food, Robert pulled out a pen and a napkin. "What's your name, son? And where do you live? We want to find a way to pay you back." Damon told them his name and address, though he didn't expect to ever see them again. In his neighborhood, people helped each other when they could, but they didn't usually stay in touch afterward. "Damon," Helen said, "you have the kindest heart. Your parents raised you right." "It was mostly my grandmother," Damon said. "She's the one who taught me that helping people is always the right thing to do." As Damon prepared to leave the deli, his stomach growling but his heart full, he had no idea that this simple act of kindness was about to change his life forever. Robert wasn't just any ordinary man struggling to get by. He was someone with connections, someone with resources, and someone who never forgot a good deed. But for now, Damon was just a 12-year-old boy walking back to school with empty pockets and a smile on his face, knowing he had done the right thing. The moment Damon handed over his $5 to Tony, something shifted in the small deli. The air seemed to grow warmer, and even the other customers who had been eating quietly stopped to watch what was happening. Tony took the money with a respectful nod and immediately got to work. He moved with purpose, selecting the best bread from his rack and the freshest ingredients from behind the glass counter. This wasn't just any order. This was something special. "I'm gonna make you folks the best meal you've had in weeks," Tony announced as he started slicing turkey and ham. His voice carried a warmth that filled the small restaurant. Robert and Helen stood there in amazement, still not quite believing what had just happened. Helen kept looking at Damon like he was some kind of angel who had appeared out of nowhere. "Honey," she said to her husband, her voice shaky with emotion, "in all my 68 years, I've never seen anything like this." Robert nodded, his own eyes getting misty. "The boy doesn't even know us and he just gave up his lunch." Damon shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, and all the praise was making him feel embarrassed. "It's really not a big deal," he said quietly. But it was a big deal to Robert and Helen. They had been married for 45 years, had raised 3 children, and had worked hard their entire lives. Robert had been a factory supervisor for 30 years before the plant closed down. Helen had been a school secretary until her arthritis got so bad she couldn't type anymore. They had never asked for handouts, never expected charity, and had always managed to take care of themselves until now. The past few months had been brutal. Their Social Security checks barely covered their rent and basic utilities. Robert's heart medication cost more than they spent on food in a month. They had been selling their belongings one by one just to survive. First Helen's jewelry, then Robert's tools, then pieces of furniture that had been in their family for generations. Yesterday, they had eaten their last can of soup. This morning they had shared a sleeve of crackers and called it breakfast. They had walked the 4 blocks to Tony's Deli, hoping against hope that maybe they had enough change for something small, something to keep them going until their delayed check arrived. They never expected a 12-year-old boy to step in and save the day. Tony worked like an artist, layering meat and cheese on fresh Italian bread. He added lettuce, tomatoes, pickles, and a special sauce that made everything smell incredible. As he worked, he kept glancing at Damon with a look of approval. "You know," Tony said to the boy, "I've been running this place for 20 years. I've seen a lot of people come and go. But what you just did, that's something special." Damon felt his cheeks get warm. "My grandmother always says that when you help someone, you help yourself too." "I'm not sure what she means exactly, but it always makes sense when it happens." Tony smiled. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." "She is," Damon said proudly. "She raised me and my little sister mostly by herself. She taught us that family isn't just the people you're related to. It's anyone who needs your help." Helen reached over and gently touched Damon's shoulder. "Would you sit with us while we eat, please? It would mean so much to have your company." Damon looked around the deli. He still had about 20 minutes before he needed to be back at school. "Okay," he said. "I'd like that." They found a table by the window and Tony brought over a feast. 2 large bowls of steaming chicken noodle soup, thick sandwiches cut in half, bags of chips, and even some of his homemade cookies. He also brought Damon a glass of milk and a small sandwich. "This one's on the house," Tony said with a wink. "Can't have you going back to school on an empty stomach." As they ate, Robert and Helen told Damon about their life. They had lived in the same neighborhood for 40 years, had watched it change from a thriving community to one where many people struggled just like they did now. They talked about their children, 2 daughters who lived far away and couldn't help much, and a son who was doing his best but had his own family to worry about. "We've never been in a situation like this before," Robert admitted. "It's humbling, you know, to realize that everything you worked for your whole life can disappear so quickly." Helen nodded. "When Robert's factory closed, we thought we'd be okay. We had some savings and we figured Social Security would be enough. But then the medical bills started piling up, and the cost of everything just kept going up." Damon listened careful. Their story reminded him of conversations he'd overheard between his mom and Nana Betty late at night, when they thought he was asleep. Conversations about bills and worry and wondering how they were going to make it through another month. "It's not your fault," Damon said simply. "Sometimes bad things happen to good people. That's what Nana Betty says. She says the important thing is to keep being good, even when things are hard." Robert reached across the table and shook Damon's hand. "Your Nana Betty raised a fine young man." As they finished eating, Helen pulled out a small notebook and a pen. "I want to write down your address again and your grandmother's name." When our check comes, and it will come, we're going to find a way to pay you back. You don't have to do that, Damon said. Yes, we do, Robert said firmly. What you did today, giving up your lunch money for two strangers, that's not something we'll ever forget. And it's not something we'll let go unreturned. Helen was writing carefully in her notebook. We may not have money right now, but we have other things. Connections, people who owe us favors. You just wait and see. Damon didn't know what she meant by connections, but he could see that it was important to them to feel like they could give something back, so he nodded and smiled. As they prepared to leave, Tony came over with a small bag. Damon, these are for your grandmother. Some of my homemade cookies. Tell her they're from someone who appreciates how she raised you. The bell chimed again as they all walked outside together. The sun was shining brighter now, and the street seemed more colorful somehow. Robert and Helen walked Damon partway back to school, moving slowly but with more energy than they'd had when he first saw them. You know, Helen said as they reached the corner where they would part ways, I haven't felt this hopeful in months, not just because we got to eat a good meal, but because we met someone like you. It reminds me that there's still goodness in the world. Robert pulled out his wallet and showed Damon a small worn business card. This has my son's work number on it. His name is James, and he runs a big company downtown. I'm going to call him tonight and tell him about what you did today. Damon looked at the card but couldn't read it clearly. The printing was small and the card was old. What kind of company? He asked. Construction, Robert said. He builds things. Big things. Important things. He paused and looked directly at Damon. But more importantly, he's the kind of man who appreciates good character when he sees it. Just like his old dad. They said goodbye at the corner, with Helen giving Damon a hug that reminded him of Nana Betty's hugs, warm and safe and full of love. As Damon walked back to school, he could hear them talking excitedly to each other, their voices carrying a hope that hadn't been there an hour ago. Back in the classroom, Damon's teacher noticed that he seemed different somehow, more confident, more at peace. When she asked if everything was okay, Damon just smiled and said he'd had a really good lunch. He had no idea that at that very moment, Robert was walking Helen home as fast as his old legs could carry him, eager to call his son and tell him about the most extraordinary thing that had happened to them in years, and he definitely had no idea that James would drop everything he was doing to learn more about the 12-year-old boy who had restored his parents' faith in humanity with a simple act of kindness. The next evening, Damon was helping Nana Betty fold laundry in their small living room when 3 firm knocks echoed through their apartment. It wasn't the usual pattern of neighbors or friends. This was the knock of someone with business to discuss. Nana Betty looked up from the basket of clothes, her eyebrows raised. Who could that be at this hour? She wondered aloud. It was just past 6 o'clock, and people in their building usually didn't make formal visits after dinner time. Damon went to the door and looked through the peephole. What he saw made him step back in surprise. Standing in the hallway was a tall black man in an expensive-looking suit, and behind him were Robert and Helen from the deli. Nana Betty, Damon called softly. I think you need to see this. She walked over and took her own look through the peephole. Her hand went to her chest in surprise. Lord have mercy. Who are these people? I know the older couple, Damon said. They're the ones from yesterday. From the deli. The ones you bought lunch for? Nana Betty's voice carried a mix of pride and concern. Baby, what did you get yourself into? Damon opened the door slowly, keeping the chain lock attached. Hello? He said uncertainly. The man in the suit stepped forward with a warm smile. Good evening. Are you Damon? Yes, sir. My name is James Hendricks. These are my parents, Robert and Helen. I believe you met them yesterday. Helen stepped forward, beaming. Damon, we told you we'd find a way to thank you. Nana Betty unhooked the chain and opened the door wider. Please come in, she said, her voice cautious but polite. I'm Betty Washington, Damon's grandmother. James entered first, and Damon immediately noticed how he carried himself. Confident, but respectful. Successful, but not arrogant. His suit looked like it cost more than Nana Betty's monthly rent, but he wasn't showing off. He removed his hat and nodded respectfully to Nana Betty. Mrs. Washington, it's an honor to meet you. My parents have told me extraordinary things about your grandson. The small living room suddenly felt even smaller with 4 adults, and Damon crowded into it. Nana Betty quickly moved some folded clothes off the couch and gestured for everyone to sit. Can I get you some coffee? Or water? she offered, her hospitality kicking in despite her confusion. That's very kind, but we won't stay long, James said. We just wanted to meet the young man who helped my parents and to meet the woman who raised him. Robert leaned forward, his eyes bright with excitement. Betty, may I call you Betty? Your grandson did something yesterday that changed our lives. He told me he bought you lunch, Nana Betty said carefully. That was his lunch money. It was so much more than that, Helen said, her voice emotional. We hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. We were at our lowest point and Damon appeared like an angel. James pulled out a small notebook from his jacket pocket. After my parents called me last night, I did some research. I learned about your family, your neighborhood, your situation. I hope you don't mind. Nana Betty stiffened slightly. What kind of research? Nothing invasive, James assured her quickly. I just wanted to understand the kind of people we were dealing with. I called Damon's school, spoke to some neighbors, talked to a few local business owners. I wanted to know if what my parents experienced was typical behavior for your grandson. Damon felt nervous. What had people said about them? About their financial struggles? James smiled at Damon. Everyone I spoke to said the same thing. You're respectful, hardworking, and always willing to help others. Your teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, told me you stay after school to help clean classrooms without being asked. Tony from the deli said you've been walking past his place for months, always polite, never causing trouble. The man at the corner store, Helen added, said you return extra change when he gives you too much back, even when it's just a few pennies. Nana Betty's expression softened with pride. That's how I raised him. And that's exactly why we're here, James said. He leaned back and looked directly at Damon. Son, do you know what I do for a living? Damon shook his head. I own a construction company. Actually, 3 construction companies. We build office buildings, shopping centers, apartment complexes. We employ over 500 people across the city. Nana Betty's eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent. I started with nothing, James continued. My parents worked hard their whole lives, saved every penny they could to help me go to college. After I graduated, I came back here and started my first company with a loan and a lot of hope. He paused and looked at his parents with obvious love and gratitude. But success changes you sometimes. You get busy, focused on profits and deadlines. You forget about the simple acts of kindness that matter most. Until yesterday, when my parents reminded me what really counts. Robert reached over and patted his son's knee. We raised him right, but sometimes even good people need reminders. James nodded. When my parents told me about Damon, I realized I'd been looking for something without even knowing it. I've been wanting to start a program to help young people in our community, not just with money, but with opportunities. Real opportunities. Damon felt his heart start beating faster. This conversation was going somewhere he hadn't expected. Mrs. Washington, James said, turning to Nana Betty, I'd like to propose something, but I want you to know there are no strings attached and no expectations beyond what any decent person would have. What kind of proposal? Nana Betty asked, her voice careful. James pulled out some papers from his briefcase. I want to offer Damon a full scholarship to Riverside Academy. It's a private school across town, one of the best in the state. The scholarship would cover tuition, books, uniforms, transportation, everything. The room went completely silent. Damon felt like he couldn't breathe. But that's not all, James continued. I'd also like to offer you a job, Mrs. Washington. My main office needs someone to manage the front desk, handle phones, greet clients. It comes with health insurance and a salary that would, well, let's just say it would make things easier for your family. Nana Betty's hand started shaking. Sir, this is very generous, but why? We don't even know you. Helen leaned forward. Because kindness should be rewarded. Because good people deserve good things. Because Damon gave us hope when we had none left. And because, James added, I believe in investing in character. Academic programs can teach skills, but they can't teach heart. Damon already has the heart. We just want to give him the tools to go with it. Robert pulled out the napkin from yesterday, now carefully folded in his wallet. We wrote down your address on this napkin and we promised we'd find a way to thank Damon. This is how. Damon looked at Nana Betty, whose eyes were filled with tears. Can we think about it? She asked. Of course, James said. Take all the time you need. But I want you to know this offer comes with no expectations except that Damon continues to be the kind of person he already is. He stood up and handed Nana Betty a business card. My direct number is on there. Call me when you're ready to talk or if you have any questions. As they prepared to leave, Helen hugged Damon again. "Whatever you decide, honey, know that you changed our lives. You reminded us that goodness still exists in this world." After they left, Damon and Nana Betty sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Finally, Nana Betty spoke. "Baby, I think you just opened a door that's going to change everything." Damon looked at the business card in her hands. For the first time, he could read it clearly. James Hendricks, CEO, Hendricks Construction Group, and underneath, in smaller print, Building Dreams, Creating Opportunities. Neither of them slept much that night, their minds racing with possibilities they had never dared to imagine.